You all really seem to love Five Nights at Freddy's as Dungeons and Dragons characters. It was one of the most viewed videos on the channel in recent history. So, I decided to do a second one. That's it. Nothing else to it. Let's create some chaos! Michael continued his journey to destroy his father's horrible creations, but Wilfred Afton's reach was far and wide. Every village, town, and kingdom that Michael came across showed some signs of Afton's influence. Despite what happened at Henry's Tavern, similar taverns with warforged bands were popping up everywhere, and with each of them came their own tragedy. Each one that Michael came across in search for his father had horrific tales about a string of missing people connected to the tavern. He wasn't quite sure how any of them were still running amidst all the disappearances, but Michael knew he couldn't let them continue. Michael would pose as someone interested in working at the taverns during the night, and while in them, would investigate the places to confirm if there was any evidence on his father's misdeeds. If he found the proof he was looking for, which was more often than not, then he would set a small fire and let the place burn down overnight. After countless years of following his father's tracks, Michael found himself back in the kingdom of Frasbear where he grew up. He stopped at his childhood home, now abandoned, to rest up and gather some supplies. As he wandered through his old home, he noticed a doorway that he could have sworn was never there before. Peering into it, he saw a small staircase leading deep down into the darkness. He lit a fireball in his hand and descended into the depths of his old home. The air was cold and dusty at the bottom. Michael raised the fireball, but its light barely touched the side walls of the basement. Looking around, he saw it was some kind of laboratory, one he assumed was run by his father, but from how long ago, he didn't know. Michael refused to believe his father was working on a warforge right underneath the noses of his family, but the wear and tear of the equipment around him spoke to the contrary. Michael was thrown out of his thoughts by the echoes of a growl coming from somewhere deeper in the lab. He turned around and pointed the flame toward the source of the noise, but was met with only more darkness. Cautiously, he stepped deeper into the basement, closer to the noise. Soon the flame's light fell upon a large cage, and at first it appeared to be empty, but as Michael got closer, he could see the silhouette of a beast pressing itself against the back bars. When it noticed the light, the beast lunged at Michael and tried to claw at him through the bars. It was only then that he was able to get a good look at what was in the cage. The flame threw harsh shadows across the beast's many faces. A mix of organic and mechanical components made up its body, with wires and tubes poking through its outer coating. The center head, with its almost jester-like appearance, stared into Michael's blank eyes, while the other two heads, one resembling a fox and the other a bear, sat lazily at its sides. Michael raised his flame to light more of the room, trying to get a better look at the beast and seeing if there was any information left behind on what this thing could possibly be. On the left of the cage, Michael spotted a table that seemed to have some papers on it. He broke eye contact with the center head and started to walk around the cage towards the table. Immediately, the beast let out a snarl as the jester's face split open and it threw itself at the walls of the cage again. Only this time, the cage nudged itself with the force. Both Michael and the beast noticed, and the latter continued its assault on the bars, moving the cage more and more with each hit. Michael slowly backed away as the beast became more and more violent. The bars were bending out of shape as the cage began tilting forward and backwards. Michael turned and made a run for the stairs when he heard the metal bars give out, and the beast let out a triumphant roar. The sound of footsteps was growing louder and louder before he was knocked to the floor, and everything went black. Michael woke up on the basement floor as the bright light shone directly onto his face. He picked himself up and looked around the room. The whole laboratory was visible now, and as he made a complete turn, he could see why. Where the stairs leading down into this basement once sat, There was instead a massive hole that connected the lab directly to the outside world. The sunlight streaming through the hole gave Michael the light he needed to fully take in his surroundings. The lab was a cluttered mess of discarded metallic parts, diagrams, and vials. Just from a glance, it was unclear what Wilford was trying to accomplish down here, but after seeing the recently escaped beasts, Michael was pretty sure it wasn't meant to be anything beneficial. Slowly overcoming his dazed state, Michael remembered the table full of papers that was sitting next to the caged chimera. He headed to the back part of the basement and saw the table had been overturned and the papers scattered and trampled on from the beast's escape. He knelt down and tried to read some of the notes on the papers. While he couldn't find any information on the chimera itself, he did find several papers about other warforged that his father made that seemed eerily similar to different parts of the beast. There were 4 warforged creatures that were specifically created in the basement: a fox, a bear, and 2 humanoid ones, one made to resemble a jester and the other a dancer. There wasn't anything mentioning combining all 4 of the warforged creatures into one, but there were scattered notes about each of them being sent off to Aftons taverns across several different villages and towns. Most of the taverns Michael had already come across and burnt down, but there was one town on the paper that Michael hadn't been to yet. Michael gathered his things, even swiping some tools from the laboratory, and heading off towards the last tavern. Michael walked through the kingdom of Frasburg and headed deep into the forest. The trees swayed in the breeze as Michael walked alone down the worn path that connected the villages. He kept his head on a swivel, keeping an eye out for any potential threats, specifically the chimera creature that had escaped the basement. It was likely that the creature had his scent memorized, but if it wanted to harm Michael, why hadn't it done so when he was knocked out? Michael kept walking, shaking the hypotheticals from his head, when he heard a rustling coming from some nearby foliage. Instinctively, Michael drew his sword and lit a fireball in his hand, ready to defend himself. For a while, nothing happened. Michael stood his ground, holding his guard up, while the bushes in front of him would rustle every so often. Eventually, Michael figured it was just some woodland creatures, lowered his sword, and continued on his way. But as he did so, a dog jumped out from the rustling bushes and threw itself onto Michael. The dog's yellow fur glowed in the sunlight as it continually licked his face. Michael tried to get the dog off of him, but it refused to leave before it was finished showing affection for him. The dog continued licking Michael for a little while longer before deciding to hop off of its victim and let him get back to his feet. Michael thanked the dog and petted it on the head before continuing along the path. He didn't get far before he noticed the sound of footsteps following him. He turned and saw the dog had decided to accompany Michael through the forest. Michael smiled and tried to tell the dog to run along, that the place he was going was far too dangerous for such a small creature. But the dog only stared at him with his tongue out and tail wagging. He tried to get the dog to sit and stay, but as soon as he resumed walking, the dog would get up and follow him. Picking up a small branch from the ground, Michael waved it in front of the dog's face and tossed it into the woods, hoping to buy himself some time as the dog was busy searching for the branch. Unfortunately, Michael only got about 30 feet before the dog emerged from the bushes in front of him with a stick in his mouth. No matter what Michael tried, the dog would refuse to let him carry on his journey alone. Defeated, Michael let out a faint sigh and allowed the dog to accompany him. The two continued down the forest path together, Michael still apprehensive about his new companion, while the dog was happily strolling through nature. They nearly reached the other side of the forest as the sun began to dip below the horizon, covering the trees in a shade of blue. As the sky grew darker, the dog began making more and more panicked noises. It whimpered and covered its eyes before turning and growling at Michael. Its behavior was becoming more and more erratic, cycling between fearful, angry, and friendly in a matter of seconds. Underneath all the noises, Michael could have sworn he heard the sound of tearing flesh and cracking bones. The dog howled before running into the trees, leaving Michael alone with only the whistling of the leaves. The bushes rustled for the second time that day. Michael drew his sword at the sound of the foliage. The rest of the forest faded away as Michael concentrated on the rustling of the leaves. He heard something break through the bushes and rolled away before it knocked him down again. Looking back, Michael saw that it wasn't the dog that broke through the bushes, but instead a hulking bipedal wolf-like creature with glowing red eyes, sharp teeth, and blue and white fur. It raised a claw to swipe at Michael, who held up his sword to block the attack. However, the sword only succeeded in stopping the momentum of the swing, but did little damage to the creature's arm. Again, the creature raised its arm to attack Michael, but this time, Michael rolled backwards to dodge and put space between the two of them. The beast let out a deafening howl, dropped on all fours, and began sprinting at Michael. Michael sidestepped the charge and swung his sword along the creature's side. He felt the sword make contact with it, but the creature merely stopped running and turned around, seemingly unaffected by the attack. Shocked at the creature's dexterity, Michael was unprepared for the next attack and was hit square in the chest by a swipe from a claw. Michael went soaring through the air and landed on the ground several feet away from the beast and several feet away from his sword. The chest wound that he received when his father had ripped out his heart had been reopened, and the blood was beginning to pool up. The beast launched itself into the air, landing directly on top of him. Michael was too drained and injured to fight back physically, but had just enough strength to summon a small fireball in his hands. As the flame illuminated the dark, the creature's attitude changed. It shrunk away from the fire as if it was scared of it. Michael struggled to his feet while still holding the fireball. He shuffled closer to the wolf beast that had continually tried to back away. His strength slowly returning, Michael made the fireball bigger, causing the creature to recoil. To his surprise, the closer the flame got to the creature, the more the creature began transforming. Its blue and white fur was becoming more yellow, and the beast also appeared to be getting smaller. As the flames grew brighter, the vicious creature shrunk back into the dog that had been accompanying Michael on his journey mere moments before. The dog let out a weak whimper and shot off back into the woods again, except this time, Michael could feel that it was gone for good. Clutching his chest, Michael shuffled over to his sword, picked it up, and limply made his way through the rest of the forest and into the next town. As Michael entered the next town, he needed no help finding the tavern. It was by far the biggest building he had ever seen, easily being at least 50 times the size of all the other ones. Additionally, unlike all the other taverns Michael had come across, this one didn't seem to be operational. The building looked presentable from the outside, but as Michael got closer to it, he found that the entrance doors were barely hanging on to their hinges, breaking free from the wall when he tried to push them open. The inside was a much better indicator that the place wasn't inhabited. Debris and garbage littered the floor as beams of moonlight crept through the holes in the ceiling. The rhythmic sound of water droplets rang through the empty rooms, as the occasional bit of wood would slip free from its resting place and splinter on the ground. Michael lit a fireball and began walking through the massive building, admittedly getting lost among this tavern's new and larger layout. He didn't even know where to begin looking for the usual clues. There were so many different side rooms that branched off from the main area that all seemed to once have their own unique purpose and function. Going off of his usual methods from all the other taverns he destroyed, Michael opted to find an area that seemed to be off limits to the general public and start there. He found himself going deeper and deeper into the building, similar to when he found his father's laboratory back at his old home. The deeper he went, the more decrepit and dusty the building became. He found the remains of previous taverns built on top of the ruins of even older taverns, like this place was a prime spot for something important that his father refused to let go of. Eventually, Michael found himself in a room that didn't seem to go any deeper. It was a small concrete room that was largely barren except for a few loose pieces of paper scattered across the floor. Michael walked around the room surveying the papers, none of which held any of the information he was looking for, when his eyes fell on the room's back wall. There was a small section of the back wall that was a different color from the rest of it. The brown, dirty discoloration of the wall seemed to end and give way to a clean gray color, largely clear of any residual dust or dirt. He tapped his knuckles against the two different parts of the walls, and discovered the cleaner section of the wall sounded like it was much thinner than the other parts. Using the hilt of his sword, Michael began striking the thin wall, chipping away at the concrete little by little. After only a couple of minutes, he broke a hole through the wall and peered inside, but saw nothing but darkness. Michael backed away and started kicking a hole in the wall big enough for him to step through. He lit another fireball in his hand and scanned the room, coming face to face with the glowing purple eyes and yellow muzzle of his father. His father's decrepit remains soon emerged from the dark room, his body stuttering with every step as if walking was something he had to relearn. It had been quite a while since Michael had actually seen what was left of his father, that he was unsure of what he had actually been up to all this time. Wilford approached Michael, who was still on the ground, and raised his arm, ready to plunge it into his son's chest. However, this time, Michael was prepared. He rolled underneath his assailant and used his sword to slash one of his father's legs. The limb went soaring into the distance before it was swallowed up by the dark room. Wilford fell to the ground, unable to keep himself up. Michael approached his father, raised the sword above his head, and with a final goodbye, plunged the sword into Wilford's skull. His body went limp as he laid there splayed on the ground. Michael backed up and slid down a wall, relishing in the fact that his mission was finally over. With the source of his hatred extinguished, Michael prepared to close his eyes and drift off to sleep when he heard the sound of moving flesh. He opened his eyes and saw that the place where his father's body once was now had a gray, plain-looking humanoid lying in its place. Michael got up and approached the new creature. It didn't look anything like his father at all. He had no clue what this thing was or where it came from, but he knew for certain it wasn't his father, though it had moved and casted spells like his father. There were so many questions about Wilford that Michael needed answers to. Unsure whether he was really dead or not, Michael climbed his way out of the concrete room and began searching for his father, alongside whatever it was that was able to mimic him. If you want to see more videos like this, I highly recommend you check out the first part of Five Nights at Freddy's characters in Dungeons & Dragons, or Five Nights at Freddy's characters Venomized, which is a series I did almost a year ago now. But thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. In terms of horror and pushing my art to places I'm not too comfortable with, I think I nailed it. I'm getting so much better with understanding how to render fur out, and the goopiness of the mimic just looks so creepy. I love it. But let me know what you all think about them in the comments below, because once again, we've got things to vote on. In the comments below, feel free to vote on which of these three artworks you feel was the best interpretation of a D&D race or class, or best design overall, which one was your personal favorite, and which one had the creepiest design. Now we will announce the winners from the previous episode. Last week's episode was Voice Actor Fusions Part 5, specifically with voice actors who had voiced at least one Transformer. The categories for that episode were Best Shading, Best Overall Design, and Best Story. Best Shading, the winner goes to Edward Bosco's Al Leaf Star, the Sound Demon. Best Overall Design also goes to Edward Bosco's Al Leaf Star, the Sound Demon. And the winner for Best Story is a tie between King Star Bob Scream Pants from Tom Kenny, Thorod Knuckles from Travis Willingham, and Ali Star the Sound Demon from Edward Bosco. So, all of them. It was a three-way tie. But thank you once again to everybody who took the time to vote in the comments. And now, to highlight some comments. Our first comment comes from Galahound19, who says, "KyngPin, your artwork is the perfect combination of weird and fantastic." Thank you so much. I'm really glad weird is one of the words that can be used to describe my art style. I don't know, there's just something about the word weird that I really, really like and take as a compliment. Our second comment comes from Jacob W618, who says, another great Fusion video for the books. I'd love to see more Fusion videos that have a theme to them. Maybe potential community redraw could be voice actor fusions? That sounds like it'd be a cool idea. Definitely. I think I've got more specifically themed voice actor fusions that I can implement down the line. As for community recreations, that could be a pretty cool idea for a prompt, but I definitely have to figure out how I do the video. Always a possibility though. And our final comment comes from Josh Wen, who says, great job! I love the central theme for a VA fusion. I'd love to see a Horizon series episode or a video game version in general. Great job. Once again, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed the video. And yeah, specific video games, just any type of specific voice actor fusion you would like to see, leave them down in the comments of this video or the last video. And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you want to see more FNAF content, it will be up here in the top for you. My name is KyngPin Creations, and I will see you all next time. Take care, everybody.